please remember to give honest answers now.
Of course.
Because I feel like you've been passionate about wanting people to know this for a while. Was it worth it? Is it worth being a poker dealer?
Money-wise, yes. Everything else, no.
Now, this is for you specifically,
yes,
of course.
For me specifically, I don't think... There are days where I feel like it's not worth the money also. But for the most part, it's worth the money.
Now, can you elaborate and tell us why? Like, what is it that would ever make somebody say... Actually, let me ask you this. How many days a week would you say on the average that you work?
I'd say 3 to 4.
Okay, so you work 3 to 4 days a week, and in those 3 to 4 days a week, how much do you think you're taking home after taxes?
It could go from 600 to like 1,000 or more.
So the money's really good, and you know, you've said it before, you have the ability while you're dealing poker to do other stuff on the side. It doesn't have to consume your life. You can still pursue your passions, right?
Yes.
Okay, but why would you say it's not worth it?
Pull out my scroll.
No.
Well, it's a lot on the body, number one. Developing something like arthritis or back problems or neck problems is pretty much inevitable as a poker dealer, especially if your mechanics are off. Like, mechanics are so important.
Yes.
Yes, mechanics are so important.
I had to
when
retrain her. I had to retrain you. What happened? Tell them what happened before I retrained you how to pitch.
Yeah, so like I was pitching incorrectly and I ended up developing this like cyst on my wrist.
It's been there for what, 4 years?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, this little like hump right here, like that's not supposed to be there. So I developed this cyst on my wrist. It's called a ganglion cyst actually, and I believe it's because I was pitching cards like this versus
I know 2 other dealers that have developed it from all the extra wrist motion, and I try to teach dealers just to pitch like this. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to pause this actually for a second.
Yep.
It's really important to me that as I interview people and as I have these conversations, I understand that I teach a course on how to deal poker. I understand that it's, you know, anybody can learn how to do it. But I don't think it would be right if the conversation made it seem only positive when there's negative things in dealing poker, just like anything. Mm-hmm. And so it's much more important to me to capture that properly. Now, I could go and have a conversation with you guys about what it's like to be a poker dealer and talk about the negative things, but it's much more powerful when I bring someone that has had some negative experiences to say it. Because, I mean, if I'm being honest, my experiences have been mostly positive, and it just is what it is, right? There have certainly been days where the players have gotten to me and stuff like that, but for the most part, they're not. So I'm sorry. I wanted to sort of say that because, like, it is important to capture the real job, right? Like, you're making the money that you're making. You talked about how 3 to 4 days a week you're taking home after taxes, you know, 6 to 1,000. So the cyst is hard on the body. You mentioned at one point you had some back problems that you experienced from that.
If the poker room that you're working in doesn't have great chairs like my poker room, you're gonna have backaches and back pain and neck pain and whatnot. Like the chairs that we have, there's like little to no back support, so it's like I'm constantly like up here dealing when I could be like chilling back here with great back support. Now there are things that I can buy in order to like supplement for the space that's back there. I just haven't yet. But still, like, it's still a lot on the body because you're constantly reaching forward. There are players who put the bet like right here, like right in front of them versus like pushing it out for the dealer. And you know, if you don't say anything and you just grab it over time, that's gonna weigh on you. And that's what's happening to me, especially working like 5, 6, 7 days in a row. Sometimes it's like terrible on the body, my body personally.
So I am going to say, knowing Jazz, her body is a bit more sensitive to stuff like this than most. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are like that. I'm not trying to take a knock at her or anything like that. I personally have dealt many 12-hour shifts and been fine with it. I've never got myself in a situation where for 6 months or more I've worked full-time as a poker dealer. I hear that working full-time as a poker dealer from the dealers I've managed and all this stuff is absolutely the most brutal on the body because of how much repetition it is for that 40 hours a week or so. And Jazz doesn't even work that, but most of when you've complained about it, and I just want to point this out, is when you've had to do 5 days.
Yes, 5 days, and each shift is like 8 hours.
Given the fact you work 3 to 4 days a week, do you feel like you get 8 hours per day?
No.
Usually, how long would you say you're working on the average?
I'd say depending on the day, it's between like 5 and 8.
And it's still not worth it.
Yeah. But that's just
That's your
me.
opinion.
Like,
Yeah, I get
yeah,
it.
I feel like it's not worth it. There are some people who absolutely love dealing. They love their job and they don't care about all the pain it causes because they just love poker. So I'm just not one of those people.
How many total tables would you say you dealt in your last 8-hour shift yesterday?
I think I had at least 4 breaks yesterday, so maybe I dealt like,
Maybe 12 tables?
yeah, something like that.
11, 12. So 30 minutes per table, 11 to 12 tables for the shift. That's pretty common, honestly. Then you get about a total of 2 hours of breaks. In her case, it's sort of weird, right? It's like a break when you start, then 1 table of dealing, then another break. Then you probably did a string of 4 tables or something, then
Yeah.
another break, then another string of like 5 tables, and then you probably took off. Maybe it was 10 tables total, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, she sort of exaggerates when she says 8 hours and it was 7. It is what it is.
It was 8 hours.
It's in an 8-hour shift, getting about 4 breaks is pretty normal. But it can certainly be where you'll get 6 breaks in a day as well.
Mm-hmm.
It can work out that way. It depends how much staff there is, what the business is like. So can you tell us more of what you've described so far? Definitely makes sense for some of the negatives, but it's not quite enough to say that it's not worth it. What are we missing here?
Again, this is like my experience. I don't like being surrounded by negative people, and there are like tons of those in the casino. There's a lot in the poker room too. For like 5, 6, 7 hours, each table that I'm at, it's just like, of the 8 players that are there, because we're 8-handed now, there's at least 5 of them who are just like, aggressively folding their cards. They're like whispering stuff under their breath. They're cursing, and they're just doing all these like negative things that like affect me. So it's like, in a sense, I feel like it's a lot like on my spirit, if that makes sense, because I don't like being around negative people in general.
Do you have any stories that you could share about people who have affected you negatively in a given day that you're willing to share, rather? You don't have to say their names. In fact, I would suggest you don't.
Well, yeah. So the main story that I have in my head, I'm trying to figure out how to even say the story without saying names, but there was a player who is notorious for just being a douchebag, and in this situation, the player upset me, but the floor sort of upset me more. He was doing his normal douchey stuff, and I called the floor over, and I told the floor what he was doing. And, usually in a situation like he was like calling me out of my name and everything. It was really bad. And usually in a situation like that, the floor is supposed to, well, I think the way that I was being disrespected, the floor is supposed to, kick that person out. But in that situation, like, the floor took the player side, and I was just like, I was in tears, literally. That's how bad I was in tears because of how mad I was, because of like how the situation played out. And yeah, that's sort of my story.
So Gloria here says, you ever get bullied on the table as a female dealer? Believe it or not, this particular story I don't think is because you're a female dealer. I think this player just likes to do this. Mm-hmm. I want to sort of comment on the story that you're talking about, and then I actually would love for you to answer that question.
Yeah.
But so first of all, universally, floors do not get trained well. They just sort of get thrown into it, and these types of situations are a result of poor training. I actually don't think this floor was a bad person, but here's the thing. A floor, when they go to the table, should absolutely handle these types of things. There's no reason for a dealer to get to this point, but it happens because the training in the industry is not universally there. I do have a passion to get to that point, but I gotta finish everything with the dealing side first, right? But when you get trained as a floor, you're literally just thrown into it. You get the rundown on like a checklist, and you don't go through and simulate things. You don't have someone shadowing you for floor calls most of the time for very long. And when a player starts giving it to a dealer, if you don't know how to handle that, you don't handle it. And then you walk away, and then the dealer ends up in tears. And Jazz is a difficult person to get to cry, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
You ever get specifically bullied as a female?
Specifically as a female, no, I do not get bullied about that often. What I pride myself on is my knowledge about the game and how to deal poker. I'm a very good dealer, even though don't really like the job. I am a very good dealer. I sort of make it so there's nothing to bully me on. Like, you know, I come to work, I'm presentable, and I know the game, I deal well, I barely make mistakes. So no, not really. I don't get bullied.
I was not sure what your answer was going to be for that. She is a good dealer. And, you know, for somebody who has not been a poker player, is also good evidence that you can be a dealer if you don't really know the game of poker very well going into it. I've known a lot of dealers that really haven't known how to play much, and then they became dealers and they still didn't really care to play that much. Jazz in general, though, this is just something that's important to point out. In general, she's harder to bully in life than most people. It just is what it is. So when somebody is harder to bully in life, they're going to approach the job of dealer as, I'm not going to give you anything that you can have on me. And that's what Jazz does.
Basically.
And dealers do get bullied when they're bad. So that's something I also want to make clear. And female dealers that are bad do get bullied more than male dealers that are bad, because it's in general easier for a male-dominated place to bully a female who doesn't know what they're doing. So the worst case scenario for you as a female dealer, not knowing what you're doing, going to sit down at a poker table, you're going to get bullied for sure. And you sort of want to have a plan. And, you know, as always, feel free to reach out to me. If you're in a situation where you think that's going to happen, you feel free to reach out to me. I can certainly help with that. So did you have any tables that you enjoyed yesterday, ever?
No, I didn't. But the tables that I do enjoy are the ones where there's at least 3 good tippers on the table and everyone else is tipping normally.
So I want to talk about something you said. I do remember what we said. You mentioned negative players all day at the table. I've talked periodically about how women in poker in general, it's just, poker rooms just aren't designed in a way that women would want to spend their time in them. And it's totally true for employees and players alike. It's just not a place that's pleasant for women. The negative attitudes come with a ton of cursing, come with a ton of like distasteful conversation, and there's a lot of disrespect that's sort of just generally flicked around. Now, me personally, all of that stuff just bounces off. I'm able to see through a lot of that stuff and push it off and then create interactions that I enjoy with people. But if you're somebody that's sensitive to those types of things, then you're going to feel like this all the time. And it's not her fault. You know, I mean, this is just the way that she's built. She wants to be happy in life. And when you go into a job where everybody's negative and like, what's the types of things that they say to you that are just like your regular negative things? I can answer if you need help.
Yeah, go ahead, answer.
I can't believe you keep dealing me these same cards. I haven't seen face card in an hour.
Are there any aces in this deck?
Are there any aces in this deck? Like,
and I say no.
Of course you do. It's just this negative first, woe is me mentality. They come, they play poker, they're regulars. People don't always understand how to get solid interaction. Because of it, they create these patterns of speech, right? And they get learned from the people around them, and poker is full of it. If these are the types of things that, you know, I mean, look, I grew up getting a lot of negative speech in my household. You know, my parents were good parents, but at the same time, it also broke me into stuff like this. Not everybody gets that, you know. All of this conversation is so forgettable to Jazz. It's just like,
yeah,
she can't even remember.
Like, throw it out of my mind.